Hockey never stops here. Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Spits and Suds. So glad to have you today. I'm Gavin Spittle of 105.3 The Fan, joined by my teammate Sean Shapiro, EP Ringside, Shap Shots. His book is called We Win Here, also D Magazine. It never stops for him as well. Mr. Shapiro, how are you today?
I'm doing well.
Good.
It's mid-July, the kind of in that spot on the calendar where we try to make a bigger deal about some things that aren't news versus that are news at the same time. I said this about the other day. Like, we've got right now in the NHL calendar, we've got like arbitration cases coming up, and obviously arbitration cases are important and everything like that, but with how few actually make it to arbitration, and it's just like offer sheets for restricted free agents, where it's real fun media fodder, and we definitely talk about them on podcasts and everything like that. But at the end of the day, it often is settled before it ever gets to an arbitration lawyer and everything like that. So it's that type of year, and I don't know. It's middle of July, but at the same time, we have an idea of sort of what teams will look like. Some prospect things feel like they're kind of around the corner. I put it out there a couple days ago that we know the Stars will be in the Prospect Tournament September 14th through 16th. We'll get to see that, and so we know we see some hockey on the calendar within the 2 months from now, right? So
Yeah,
but it's for now it's you enjoy the summer, and you try to find some other things to watch on TV and catch up on some reading, right?
absolutely. And catch up on We Win Here out at
Yes,
Amazon
exactly.
and wherever else you can find it. So, you mentioned Prospects Tournament, and for Stars fans, who can they expect to see in that tournament, and who should they be looking for?
Yeah, the big one that I'm most interested in, and I'll be up there for that tournament and interested in watching it in person, will be it's going to be Logan Stankoven's first step into kind of the can he be an NHL impact player this year? We've seen players, even players as high profile as Miro Heiskanen, where when the Miro's rookie season, he went up to Traverse City, played 2 games, and you could see right there that this kid was going to be ready for the NHL. So I'm really interested to see Logan Stankoven in that tournament against his peers from some other NHL organizations, in a spot where he should be one of the best players on the ice, because you don't win a job. You don't win an NHL job in Traverse City, but in Traverse City, you set the stage for whether you have any chance of winning a job. And I think Logan Stankoven, Maverick Bourque, seeing the two of them in that tournament, I'm interested to see how they use that as a springboard into training camp. It's really going to be a big building block, and will tell us one way or the other of whether we should be looking at is it this year or is it next year for Logan Stankoven. I think we'll start to learn all of that up there, and at the same time, it'll also be good to see against the Blue Jackets will be there, Detroit will be there, and Toronto will be there, and to see them play against a team like Columbus, who I would assume will have Adam Fantilli, the number 3 pick from this past draft up there, who could be, after Bedard is obviously a pretty good Calder favorite. Be interested to see some guys like that up there. So to me, it always feels like kind of the unofficial start to hockey season, and now we have dates for it.
When do we expect Bichel back on skates?
I believe he will. I don't know if he'll be ready for. I believe he will be ready for start of the season in Texas. I believe that. Now, to double check and see, I don't know if he'll be ready to play in Traverse City, but I do, having talked to some people from the Stars and talked to about kind of the expectation is for him to have more of a normal season lengthwise with the Texas Stars. And maybe that's I'd have to double check. I don't know the exact dates on that, but I do. But the good thing is they're not looking at the injury, and they're not looking at the recovery stopping him from having a quote unquote normal first North American season.
And that would be the defenseman in the organization that most eyes would be looking at, correct?
100%. He's the one who you're kind of looking at, like, you look at the depth on this organization, you look at where things are going, and if Liam Bichsel, who was taken right like 18th in 2022, if he can be if he can kind of be like a Thomas Harley and he can take that step, you're building all of your future defensive depth internal house, and it's a really good spot. So I would he's really interesting to me because he's coming over from Europe. He's going to be an AHL guy this year. Some defensemen adjust quickly, some don't. And he I think if I'm doing my rough math, if the timeline is still on, I think we'll see him in Traverse City, because I believe it was May 7th or 8th or whatever when he had the surgery. It was about 8 weeks, so that would put him into June, July. That would put him right now kind of starting to ramp up a bit and everything. So I think we'll see him on ice in the if as long as there's been no setbacks, I think we'll see Bichsel playing in Traverse City.
And for those that have never seen him play and are listening to this podcast, comparables, not going to say he's going to be there, but think of former start, Jamie Alexiak or Colton Parayko. Nice size. I liked when I watched the tape, Sean, I liked his skating ability. I like his stick handling, I thought he had a good shot as well. So I'm excited. I think there has been that theory, and we've seen it over the years with a Zdeno Chara, Tyler Myers, even a Jamie Alexiak. They do seem to take a little bit longer to develop. But I'm excited because he's a bigger defenseman that, has offensive ability as well.
Yeah, and I look at him probably as when you mentioned a Parayko and Alexiak, probably a little bit more Parayko-like, and where a little bit more violent, for lack of a better word, early on in his career. Like Alexiak, like the amount of times where like Alexiak used his size, but a lot of the times one of the biggest qualms with Jamie Alexiak, early career Jamie Alexiak, was he wasn't physical enough with his size, right? Like he moved well, and but Bichsel is a little bit more. He brings more. He's a little bit more energy, a little bit more aggressive, violent in the kind of in his game initially. I had someone once compare him to if he doesn't really if and obviously part of it was I'm imagining part of it was kind of a country type thing, but someone at a minimum kind of compared him to like an Oscar Klefbom for me, where it's this is, which is like a guy who's I think Klefbom played like 6 or 7 years for the Oilers, was a good 30 point guy, obviously know a little bit more defensively and everything like that. So probably that's kind of the base, and that's not a bad base. Obviously you want to see go higher than that and everything, but that was kind of a name somebody once threw out to me about him, of like this is the minimum of what you can kind of expect him to be. And that's not a bad minimum. That's not a bad thing to add at all. And if he can be more than that, you're talking about a pretty good defensive long-term plan.
So coming up on Spits and Suds, we'll have some mailbag questions that you guys tweeted us in the off season, and we're excited to give you some answers, or the best answers we can. We're also going to talk about the question, who is the biggest Dallas Stars rivalry? So that's coming up later in this podcast, but I did want to touch on two Central Division rival players that no longer have homes, which I find interesting because you saw the free agency frenzy happen in early July, and now the lull has occurred, and Patrick Kane and Vladimir Tarasenko are still without jobs. Sean, what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Kane is going to be, he's coming obviously he's coming back from injury, and he's going to be, and he's kind of waiting it out, right? That's kind of he had hip surgery. He's going to be about out 4 to 6 months. I think he kind of has the ability to pick his spot and wait into the season too. I think Kane this is more of a slow pay for Patrick Kane. His agent Pat Brisson has been pretty open about that, and he's obviously. I think if you bring Patrick Kane in for the right reasons, I think it's a good ad. Because I think he can obviously instantly come in, add a boost to a power play. The hands. I mean, we saw with Jason Spezza, right? We saw the end of Jason Spezza's career where, while the body and physical things slow down, the hands never slow down. And so I think Kane will still bring skill wherever he goes. But I think whoever brings him in is going to be, there's only going to be success there with Kane, in my view, if you're bringing him in for the right reasons to help boost a power play. You've got some depth. You're not expecting him to completely drive lines at 5-on-5 and everything like that, especially coming off that hip surgery. We've seen, obviously, Dallas fans have seen up close how long it takes for guys to come off that hip surgery. I mean, it felt like for a time, like almost every single guy in the Stars lineup had hip surgery, and it takes a while. So I would proceed with caution on Patrick Kane for whatever team. Tarasenko is one where I'm actually surprised he's not signed yet. And obviously he changed his agent, and it's similar to last summer when John Klingberg changed his agent. It's one of those where it feels like it's a guy who or his agent at least miscalculated the market, and now going for a reset with a new agent and everything. And we keep kind of hearing the rumblings that Carolina's in play for Tarasenko and everything like that. And honestly, if I'm Tarasenko at this point, I'm not afraid to go with I look at the short term, maybe 1-year deal, similar to what we saw a lot of guys sign. Like we saw like a Max Domi sign with Toronto and things like that, because he's a guy who, because of his reputation and everything like that, and playing on a good team, can probably put himself with a 1-year deal, bridge himself to a nicer deal next summer, potentially.
So during the week, Zach at ZWall93 tweeted out, extremely mid-July discussion. Who is the Dallas Stars' primary rivalry? I think I have the correct answer, but I'm curious what people think. Now, Zach responds to Zach and says, the correct answer is Cale Makar actually sucks, and that the league would lose nothing of value if Colorado was erased from history. So Zach is answering to Zach, saying that Colorado. Now, chiming in was one Sean Shapiro, who said they don't have one. And Gavin Spittle 100% agrees. And here's why, folks. To have a rivalry, it has to be a rivalry on both sides. And while we can say Colorado, I don't view the Avalanche as looking at us as a rival. The closest in division, and I would say probably the closest rivalry, you would think for a couple of years when they played in the playoffs and they did a Winter Classic, Nashville would be up there. But my finalist, due to the Dumba hit, due to the Stars moving to Dallas from Minnesota, I think probably in division Minnesota would be as close to a rivalry, but I am not ready to herald it a official rivalry, and I will say the Dallas Stars do not have a rival.
Yeah, and obviously I agree with that, and I said that. And it's, for me, I think there's an important there's an important thing to think about when it comes to rivalries in hockey. And I think it's something that people don't like to hear, but it's okay for rivalries to die, right? It's okay for there to be eras of rivalries and timelines of rivalries. For example, and I don't know, and Gavin, you'd be more of an expert on this than I would be, but for an extent, right, there was a Blue Jays Rangers rivalry in baseball, and obviously, obviously the giant, the flashpoint of the punch that is the second most famous punch in franchise history for the Rangers,
yes,
and all of that's but it's a rivalry. But to use that that's an example of 10 years, and it maybe even if it's, Odor is no longer a Ranger, Batista's career has fizzled out. Like, to pretend that Maple Leafs Rangers with Maple Leafs. I keep saying Maple Leafs Blue Jays. Blue Jays Rangers would still be a rivalry 5 years from now or even now,
Right.
because of that instant is unfair to what that rivalry was at its heat. Just like obviously the greatest rivalry in hockey history is the 90s Avalanche and Red Wings, the pure blood feud. A really great documentary that came out about that actually earlier this year, where those teams just, to call Detroit, Colorado a rivalry now is completely unfair to what that rivalry was at the heat. So like the Stars, for example, in the old North Star days, the Norris division was nicknamed the Chuck Norris division, because that's how often it was you would have Chicago and Minnesota would play, and there would be, if there was less than 4 fights in a night, you were wondering what was wrong. That's how that division was, and that's how Chicago and Minnesota were when it was the North Stars, obviously. And then, but that didn't really carry over to Dallas. And while people have their Stars fans who dislike the Blackhawks and everything like that, it's never been a Blackhawks Stars rivalry. Neither of them were very good at the same time. And the best I think the Stars had was it was a space where there could have been one with St. Louis for a little bit, but I don't really think the Stars were on top of the mind for the Blues. And you brought up a great point off the top, Gavin, where it's got to be amicable hate, right? Or it's got to be, you got to care about both sides. And I think too many teams, and I don't know how many teams in the NHL even have a true legit rival anymore.
Right.
I think there's like, especially in the Western Conference, with how teams play, with kind of some newer teams, how things have been moved around schedule wise and everything like that.
Yep.
And
rivalries come and go too, by the way.
Exactly. Yes. Like a perfect example. I mean, there is I think Dallas and that from a geographic standpoint and style and just kind of culturally wise and everything, Nashville and Dallas could be a good natural rival. They played in the playoffs. They had the Winter Classic. And even Minnesota could feel like one at times, but it's at the end of the day, and I think this is the better thing that obviously Stars fans had to think about the Wild in the playoffs this year, but it's the like the Stars, it's that old Don Draper clip where it's like the guy's in the elevator where he's like where the Stars need to be the fans to the Wild fans. Is like, I don't ever think about you. You don't like.
No, absolutely.
So.
Yeah, I agree. Like Sean, if I say Edmonton, you would say.
Well, Calgary, obviously.
There you go.
That's that.
But
that one is
You're right. You're right. That one stands out. But that is a standout rivalry. If Craig Ludwig joined us, and I said, Craig, when you were playing in the Adams division, Montreal, he'd probably say Boston, and then he'd say Quebec too, because those were Montreal's 2 biggest rivalries. But if you look at Boston, Montreal right now, I mean, is it a game that's cool to see? Sure. But is it that heated rivalry? Nah. I mean, it was Philadelphia, Pittsburgh at one time was pretty hot. So they come and go. I just wonder too, if regionalism, it can play a factor because, of the proximity of the cities to each other. And that probably hurts Dallas, which if Houston came in, that would be a natural rival because the cities don't like each other anyway. Seattle, Vancouver, obviously, when those two get good, well, Vancouver gets good. That'll be a good rivalry.
And there's it's just like we saw with, I think one of the best things for the league is hopefully Florida and Tampa continue to push each other, because that's one of those where I think we kind of had a little bit of some of the animosity finally got there and everything like that. But all of a sudden, the Battle of Florida is a game that's worth watching, just like the Battle of Alberta, right? That's something where it's to that point. Now, it wasn't like that until, at least it wasn't, I would argue that it really wasn't like that until the past season and a half or whatever, where the Panthers, where the Panthers won a President's Trophy and then did this, and now obviously the Lightning, and now they're both good, and they both, and they have a playoff series against each other, and so now there's a bit more to that, and I think it's okay for that. It's okay for rivalries to take that kind of give and take of it, and I think the Stars are they don't really have one right now, because I in my mind there was kind of this smell test of it where I don't think there's a single team on this when the schedule comes out, if you're a Dallas fan, where you're like, oh, I want to see when that team comes to town because I want to see that team lose. I don't think there's a single team on the for the Stars like that, where if you're or Gavin, if you're like, obviously the history of with your history and growing up in the Boston area, like I'm sure when you can imagine you would see the schedule and be like, man, when the Canadians come to town, it was more about seeing the Canadians lose than seeing the Bruins win sometimes.
Yep.
Right.
Oh, totally.
And there's no one on the Stars schedule.
I mean, you didn't get excited when Hartford came to town.
No.
I mean, but that to me is a good example where in Hartford, like for them, Boston was the big rivalry. But to the Bruins, I mean, because they were the little brother, Hartford's a little brother of, Boston. So it's interesting. I love rivalry talk. I really do. The only thing I'll say is that it takes two to tango. And you can say they're a rival, but I think the other side has to say they're a rival as well for a true rivalry to happen. All right, mailbag time, and we got some good ones. Which is awesome. You guys are awesome. We love the Spits and Suds faithful. Chris Barnard says, I saw a proposed scenario with Stars playing broker to a Erik Karlsson trade from San Jose to Carolina, with Dallas taking either, how would I pronounce this, Sean? Is it Pesky?
Brett Pesce.
Pesce, sorry. Or Burns in return. Yay or nay? Otherwise, what about Tony DeAngelo, who is devoid of D but solid offensively? Lastly, any updates of analytics team's first year? I will say this, we got 2 Tony DeAngelo questions, so we certainly have to hit on that too.
All right, let's go through these guys here. So I would be okay with Pesce. I think he would,
good player.
He's a good player. I think he would obviously improve the Stars defense and everything like that. For me, I'm DeAngelo and Burns. For me, I'm not going down that line because I don't think either of them. We've talked about this Stars defense needing to be better. We don't like the depth and everything like that, but we have also talked about the things you have are the offensive defensemen who need more opportunities, the Thomas Harleys, the Nils Lundqvists. We've talked on this show about not needing about moving Ryan Suter out. It won't happen, but I talked about the potential buyout for the opportunity would open for those younger players to kind of seize that opportunity. I don't think bringing in a one-dimensional offensive only defenseman and like Tony DeAngelo, I don't think that does anything for the Stars. So I would not be in on Tony DeAngelo. And with Burns, for me, it's not that I don't think Brent Burns can run a power play better than most in the NHL. I don't think at this point in his career, it's worth bringing him in and taking away that opportunity, A, on the first unit from Miro Heiskanen, or B, from that unit of allowing Lundqvist or Harley to kind of take this next step. I think I would kind of proceed with caution on Burns. We saw what happened in San Jose when Burns and Karlsson were on the same team. Yep. There's only one puck for the power play. They both need to be the guy. And I think we saw Miro Heiskanen started to be the guy in that spot. And that's not the type of defenseman that now Pesce's a different case because I think he comes in and I think he helps better in all 3 zones. And so I would be in on something like that if it were even possible, but the other 2 I would not be.
So Burns has 2 years left on his contract. $8 million per year. The obvious tie with Burns is that he loves nature, and he has a massive ranch here in Texas. So he would be closer to that ranch.
And Pete DeBoer and Joe Pavelski.
Yeah,
too.
absolutely.
Like he has there's definitely some ties. It's not that he wouldn't fit. It's that I don't think that is the it's not the chess piece you need to add. There's a different. Meanwhile, while Pesci to me is a different, actually helps with where you have issues. Burns to me is more of a luxury that you have to figure out to fit, while Pesci would instantly come in and help some things.
I agree. At Aaron Offsire says, thanks for the great Stars coverage. I'm a Stars fan in Montana. Shout out Billings.
Nice. It's
ludicrous, but there are 3 teams that are blacked out in my market: Vegas, Seattle, and Colorado. With RSNs, which is Regional Sports Network, struggling with bankruptcy market share, any guesses how long blackouts will be a thing? It's interesting that blackouts are actually a thing in Montana.
Well, all of when Seattle came into the league, the final piece of unclaimed territory was claimed in the United States, which was Alaska. The Kraken are the team of Alaska. So to get it's root sports, right? Like you can only watch the Kraken games on root. And so before that, you could watch any game on ESPN Plus or whatever the streaming service was at the time, or NHL TV, depending on the timeline. It's like, for example, Gavin, the Hawaii is a shared territory of Ducks and Kings. That's the Hawaii is the LA TV market technically. So you have to have Fox Sports, or sorry, Bally Sports Southwest or Bally Sports Prime ticket or whatever it is to watch the games in there. But places like Montana, I can only imagine that's frustrating, where you're grouped into multiple territories. The good news, and I wrote something about this closer to the Cup final, and I'll make sure to tweet this back to our friend here who asked the question of, one thing that's encouraging for being in the Montana, and he mentioned Vegas. Vegas is now working it has worked to go have a free over the air within market game, which anyone with basically rabbit ears can now go and get the game and everything like that. And that's great. And but as far as blackouts go, as long as there's any money to be made from the regional sports network model, and for right now there is, as long as there's money to be made on it somewhere, blackouts will exist because they protect those investments. They protect the investments of Bally Sports. They protect the teams when they're selling streaming rights and regional viewing rights and everything like that. And unless the NHL wants to go and do like the one North American sport that doesn't have blackouts for streaming and in market and everything like that is MLS right now. And that's because MLS went out of its way 2 years ago to not allow teams to sell beyond 2 years so that they could sell the entire package to Apple TV like they did. And for example, I know in Detroit, the Tigers and Red Wings recently re-upped with Bally Sports. And as long as teams are continuously re-upping, the Panthers re-upped with Bally last year. I know some teams are still looking for stuff right now, and like the Kings obviously don't have a TV deal yet for next year. But as long as teams have deals and teams have made money, and basically as long as there's original 6 teams in the league, because Nesson continues to be a cash cow for the league. Philly is always one of the second most viewed local TV markets in the United States after Boston. That TV deal continues to do money. As long as those exist, the league will protect those, so blackouts will happen. So unfortunately for Aaron and everyone else, blackouts are kind of a reality of what the league will do to protect its interests. And hopefully there's a better answer and a way to work with it in the future. But just right now, that's the reality of it.
Okay. Junior hockey teams in Montana: Bozeman Ice Dogs, Great Falls Americans, and Checking if the Butte Cobras are still around.
That's a pull right there.
Thank you very much. They are in the North American Tier 3 Hockey League, the Butte Cobras, sir.
There you go.
Yeah, no kidding. I can't remember what I did yesterday, but I can remember the Butte Cobras. My goodness. All right. Jordan Harper asks, our good friend up in Vancouver. Sean, I absolutely love taking questions from across the country and across North America. It's super awesome. So
it's awesome, yeah.
Jordan is a police officer in the Vancouver area. Any advice for someone to look at to travel to see a Stars/Cowboys game in the same weekend? Well, I got 2 weekends for you. Okay. The first actually isn't a weekend, but the Thanksgiving Cowboys game is special. You know, it's family, but there's just an extra cool vibe in the tailgating scene on that Thursday. People cooking turkeys in the parking lot or, you know, whatever, or just bringing their fixins to the game. You get the halftime show with a pretty good artist every year. And, you know, it's nationally televised, and you know that you're at a game that all of America is watching. So you have that, and then the very next night, the Stars host the Calgary Flames, the new look Calgary Flames. So that's a good 1-2 combo. The other one is a doozy, but get your tickets now, my friend. So December 9th, afternoon tilt at the AAC, the Stanley Cup champion Vegas Golden Knights come to town. It's an afternoon game, so you can go out that night, enjoy yourself, hopefully enjoy a nice Canadian Frosty, Jordan, as you're checking out the Dallas scene after a Stars big victory, because you can sleep in the next day because it's Sunday Night Football. It's Cowboys-Eagles.
Ooh, that's good. That is a good one, too,
seeing
right there.
Vegas and then seeing Eagles. So those are my 2 suggestions. I did see this question prior to the podcast, so I did a little prep on that. And I actually sent Jordan a direct message, and he said, well, I was actually looking for things to do in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. He has Busher Gardens up there, but the Dallas Arboretum and the Fort Worth Botanical Garden are 2 of the nicest arboretums, botanical gardens in America. I know Dallas Arboretum always ranks in the top 15 in the world. And another thing I would suggest that is kind of a hidden gem, you can, if you're a Cowboys fan, you can go to tours of the Star in Frisco, take you through the locker room, take you through the history. They have really cool artwork, pictures. You could see the first ever Cowboys logo. They show you just the inner workings of the Dallas Cowboys. And then down the street, there's the National Video Game Museum that takes you through the history of all video games. It's really cool. So those are my suggestions. Tour guide, Spittle.
Yeah. The video game museum is cool. I've been there a couple times, and it's they've got the stuff you can play. Like a couple years back, one time when we were down there, my parents were visiting and ended up randomly playing Oregon Trail for like 45 minutes. So no, it's a pretty cool place. So.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Tyler Mayer says, I understand his cap hit / base salary probably scares teams off in a flat cap world, but shouldn't Radek Faksa be a premier, quote, trade high candidate right now? His style doesn't fit DeBoer's system, and shedding him adds cap flexibility and a roster spot for a young player. I will say this about Radek Faksa. He played well at times, and I gave him credit, especially played well in some playoff games. He does play a lot. He does stay on the ice, which is good. I just think Radek Faksa was a really solid player and then got a contract, and I'm never going to fault a player for getting the money, but that salary does stick out, Sean.
Well, it sticks out, and it's the COVID implication. It's the cap COVID implication. Radek Faksa's career and narrative isn't like this if the cap had raised like expected. If it had raised as expected and everything like that, he would have been at market rate. And it's kind of the unfortunate timing of that. And it's the same reason that we saw the reason Radek Faksa is not a frontline trade candidate is the same reason that Sam Steele was available. Or the same reason that you saw other players move who were essentially unqualified, who are restricted free agents with qualifying offers, or who had pretty good arbitration cases potentially. That is why. It is just the nature of the environment where Radek Fox signed a deal that probably would have been at market rate, and the market broke by stuff completely out of his control. And it's hard to see a team willing to invest the cap space for that type of player right now. And that's I think the Stars, I believe the Stars probably will try and definitely be looking at things on Fox. I think that's definitely within the realm of possibility. It's just, it's the flat cap world where it's hard to justify that price point when at the same time the Stars are paying Matt Duchene less money for.
Yeah.
So
great point. Corey, I did want to shout you out. Thanks so much for listening. Corey D tweets, he did ask the Tony D'Angelo question that he is available. And we just touched on that, Corey, that I think it's a stay away from a Star standpoint. Let's see. And he's an offensive defenseman. Like you, Sean, you pointed on that. I think the Stars, quite honestly are fine with the offensive defenseman that they already have. Belfour's Billions. This defense core took the Stars to a top 10 finish. Seems like it can take them to the trade deadline. Then the Stars can assess options. Does Nil have the gumption to trade top picks and top prospects for a top defenseman? He's historically not been willing to take big swings.
I disagree that he hasn't been he historically has not been willing to take big swings.
Too.
I definitely disagree with that. The entire Stars, Jim Nill has always highly valued first round picks and everything like that. But it's funny. Like, people talk about being willing to take big swings, and they conveniently talk about the swings, the pitches that he didn't swing at and not bringing up the ones he did. Joe Pavelski, the initial term when they signed Joe Pavelski, how many of us looked at it and were like, man, I don't know how well that contract's going to age. Like, yes. That was a swing there.
Well, especially since we were coming off the Alexander Radulov deal.
Yeah.
Which the first season and a half, 2 seasons looked really good and then faded.
Yeah. So there's that. That's a swing to get, like, you look through the lineup, right? To go and make signing Ryan, whether you like it or not, like signing Ryan Suter to a 4-year deal was a big swing. It may not be the swing you wanted, but it was a big swing. It was bringing in kind of getting, like, honestly, getting Roope Hintz' deal done mid-season last year. That's a big swing.
Yep.
And it's one that will fly under the radar because they got it done before he popped off again in the playoffs and saved a ton of money. So I disagree that Jim Nill doesn't take big swings. I think there are Jim Nill's, not problem's the wrong word, but I think he also is very loyal, and he doesn't want to build his team the way Vegas is built. He doesn't want to build his team where he's willing to, it's important to him. His reputation of treating players well when they're here is important to him. And I think sometimes that gets in the way of certain moves people want to see, but I disagree about the lack of a big swing. But that being said, I easily could see the Stars looking at the deadline, at the trade deadline, because this team is good. This defensive core is definitely good enough to get to the deadline, and with a couple steps here and there, we had an entire show about it. It could be good enough to win a whole thing. It could be. I'm not certain in that, but still a lot of question marks. But it could be, and so I would highly expect Dallas to be looking to shop for a defender at the trade deadline, because I think that is frankly, that's the thing they kind of have to be looking at. So.
Yeah, especially with their cap condition. I would also throw some swings in there, And I think what happens sometimes is we change the vocabulary. We call it a big swing when we should actually say a swing at a marquee name player. Because, and I say that because giving your first round draft pick away for Nils Lundqvist, that to me is a big swing. I mean,
it is.
That's major currency you're giving up for, at the time, a New York Rangers top prospect. You were betting on Nils Lundqvist, and hopefully we see that this year. So I would say that's a swing. I also want to point out, when the trade deadline happened, Max Domi was, I would say, probably top 7 names mentioned as far as trade pieces. Top 5. There were some big names out there and everything, but Max Domi was certainly in the conversation with a lot of teams. And for the Stars to acquire him, I think that was a swing as well. They got what they needed at the trade deadline. And also remember, when you're taking a big swing, you need to give up stuff. And to get Max Domi, to get Dadonov, and to keep all your prospects, I think that's a good offseason. To sign Joe Pavelski, yes. The Suter thing we struggle with. But yeah, to get these names, you're absolutely right. I agree. He has taken some big swings. Okay. Fuzzy wants some hockey into his veins. By the way, Fuzzy on Twitter is looking svelte, working out all the time. Love the follow. Who do you guys think has the most dangerous shot on this team? Who has the sneakiest shot? And who do you want in a shootout lineup? Whew. 3-part question. So, most dangerous shot, Sean. Let's start with that.
Yeah. From a pure shot standpoint, it's probably Jason Robertson. That may be the. I would. It's hard to be. It's hard to not go with Jason Robertson on that. The
sneakiest shot, I'm going to say Rope Hintz.
Yeah, he's got a quick little release there. It's more sneaky in the picking it up off of that.
Yes.
But it's also like, if you wanted to be done pure quote unquote sneakiness, I think you got to give Joe Pavelski some
for the tips,
love for his work around the net, and all of that. So I think that kind of fits there. And then so what was and then the other one was the shootout
lineup. I want.
Hold on, let me think. Let's pause for a second.
I want
make mine in my head.
Antti Miettinen. I cannot think of the other guy's name that was so good in the shootout in Stars history. Sergei Zubov was amazing. Sergei Zubov was a Gatorade lifter back when, the Gatorade was on top of the net and not in that little sleeve like it is now. I mean, you would see that Gatorade bottle be lifted off the net. He could roof it that well.
Yeah, it was who was it? I know exactly what it is. I know
he was Finnish, wasn't he? No, Swedish. He was either Swedish or Finnish. But he was so good in the shootout.
He was Swedish. It was literally because I know the move. It was a move he literally picked up talking to. He would talk to Johan Hedberg about it. I can remember this stuff. It was why can I know this is bothering me?
We got a whole podcast that we can get back to it, but I would say my lineup's Robertson, Hintz, Sagan.
Yeah, I would. I like Robertson. I like Robertson 1 because I think he's their best player in the shootout right now, and I'm personally a big fan of. It was Jokinen. UC Jokinen.
Yes, that's it. Good call.
Yep. Yeah, UC Jokinen. Anywho, I like Robertson first in the shootout because I want to. I like to personally go first as a team. I like to shoot first. I think there's more pressure. I think I'd rather have my goalie face the second shot. I think goalies are more comfortable with the game on the line situation. So I would like Robertson first. I think I really like Hintz going, and then for right now, Sagan's probably 3 for me. That's I don't like across the there's a bunch of there's other ones that I think could be intriguing, but those would be my first 3 would be Robertson, Hintz, Sagan. I think you're on we're on the same mindset for that one, I think.
Okay, we're in the middle of a Spits and Suds, and by the way, if you had on your bingo card UC Jokinen and the Butte Cobras, you win the Powerball.
There you go.
All right. Jordan chimes in again. Can we talk about some prospects you have a chance to get called up during the season? Bach is one player. Keep my eye on, for example. I'll keep beating the drum on, oh my God, I always get his name wrong. Demiami.
Riley Damiani.
Damiani. But I think I'm alone there.
I don't have an issue with Damiani. I think he's he's a kind of a middle of the lineup AHL player right now. He didn't really have much of a, let's see, how many games did he play for? He had about 30 points last year for Texas and was okay. But to me, I don't see the mass appeal to go and bring him up and play in the NHL. I'm more of looking at a guy like Blumel. To me, Blumel's there. Probably give Frederick Karlstrom a chance. Probably. I think Nick. I don't think he's a guy who can play in the NHL beyond the occasional call up. And Nick Camano could still be a 4th line guy that gets called up. But to me, this Dallas lineup really is all the NHL forwards you see right now, and then Bork and Stankoven. That's your your 14, 15 deep right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I
think if one of your guns goes down, I think Maverick Bork comes up first.
Yeah, and I've never seen anything about Oscar Bach's game that tells me nothing against Oscar Bach. Just I've never seen anything about Oscar Bach's game where it's like he's shown this to me in Texas where I need this on my NHL team. On the counter, right? Where I think Bach will play the same game no matter what league he's at, and I think we kind of seen what it is. Where on the flip side, Bork to me is a guy who at 47, almost 50 points last year for Texas. I think he's actually a higher scoring player in the NHL because I think he will play off better players better than he was playing with in Texas. So, I mean, it's like if you want to go, this is where prospect stuff gets difficult because it's the base level of player is so good now. Where the guy who's playing in the AHL, if he had a time machine and he went back 5 years, he's probably playing in the NHL. But just what the base level of how good and how skilled players are, it's what makes Connor Bedard like. If Connor Bedard did things to junior hockey this year that Connor McDavid didn't do because the rest of the world that he had to compete against is better. That's not saying McDavid. And so it's just the base level of skill is so good now that, of course, you're going to look at a guy like Bach. You're going to look at a guy like Karlstrom. You're going to look at even all of them can play. It's just so much of who's going to get the opportunity, who's going to get the chance. And I think as this base level of skill gets higher and higher in the league, where you get drafted is going to be even more and more of a definer of whether you get that opportunity to prove it. Because there'll be lots of guys, I think, there are lots of players who, if they were just in the right spot, like the biggest difference between Luke Glendening and Curtis McKenzie is Luke Glendening got the chance to stick at the NHL right away. I fully believe Luke Glendening and Curtis McKenzie are very much the same player, but one of them got the chance in the NHL earlier that stuck.
So, and Jared Katz asks about defensemen, some of the defensemen we've already talked about, but just for the record, Sean, UFA class was not strong with defensemen that would really help the Stars. And there were some defensemen that were overpaid probably because there weren't a lot of D-men on the market. And the other aspect is there's no one out there, and there's no one really ready in the minors that can come up and make a difference. So I think to answer your question, Jared, on D-men, I think it needs to be addressed at the trade deadline. So do as best you can, and we'll see, how the top six fare. So, finally we end Tyler Seguin, now a married man. And the question is, did Sean Shapiro's goals against average and save percentage go up or down when he got married? And I say that because will we see a bigger year from Tyler Seguin?
Well, I was young when I got married, so I was still my body was still recovered better from the post game beverages at the time. So it's I'm laughing and it's joking, but it's also there is something to remember about the human element of this sport,
yes.
Right? Where there is a human element of this sport where it's when things are going well at home and things like that, like it's a lot easier to show up and have a good day at work.
Absolutely.
And so I don't know if there's up performance in play for Tyler Seguin because of the wedding, but it's going into the season happy. So that's I also, it's always funny to me too with I think it's kind of because you see the some players, obviously Tyler has always understood always understood his brand power. So the Seguin wedding was well publicized on Instagram and Twitter and all of that stuff because he's always understood his brand power. So, but it is interesting to see when the pictures do come out of which teammates guys were closer with than you ever realized.
Oh yeah, you know what? I didn't look at that.
Like for example, like oh,
there we go.
And I knew this, but it's like it's something where it's like when you think of all the players Tyler Seguin has played with and everything like that. If you didn't know the behind the scenes friendship like I did, you probably wouldn't have expected to see Justin Dowling with an invite to Tyler Seguin's wedding, right? Like there's that, or that, and maybe like Adam Cracknell was there too. So it's always interesting to see the kind of see which guys and which players are kind of the like I would imagine like a lot of the younger Stars players, like when like Jake Ottinger gets married someday and stuff like that, like we're going to see a lot of Joel Hanley in pictures at weddings because Joel Hanley is just like the beloved, like he's the beloved, everyone's best friend. And
heck yeah.
So it's so.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, looking at Tyler Seguin's Instagram, he had posted pictures from John Klingberg's wedding. So obviously they were close, and Jamie Benn's there. Obviously the Finn contingent, Heiskanen's there, Hintz is there. So Ben Bishop was there. So, it is, you're right. It is fun looking at those and saying, kind of reading into it like, oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't know they were buddies. Yeah. Well, congratulations to Tyler Seguin, on so many things. It's really interesting. As Sean alludes to, I grew up in the Boston area, and every time I go home, they're still complaining about Tyler Seguin. If only he was mature enough when he was with us. And I'm like, guys realize it was a salary cap dump. It was not, if you want to say that had to do with it, I'm sure go ahead. And Seguin certainly had his party days up there. But the fact remains is they did a documentary, Behind the Bees, which was on NHL Network, and they showed the war room, and they talked about having to get rid of salary. And I think it was to sign David Krejci, and Tyler Seguin came up. So that's when they made the trade. So, and you know what? He's been great.
Well, and they also, it's
Boston.
It's Boston, and it's not, and there's elements of It's one of the reasons players love playing in Dallas, and we've talked about it, is there is a bit of the, you are not, the Cowboys are here to be your battering ram, right? The Cowboys are here to kind of shield you as other pro athletes, and that's so it's easier to be incognito in Dallas, and that's just the reality of it. So.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. All right, the book is called We Win Here. Some great summer reading. Sean takes a deep dive into stories from the Texas Stars and how they became Dallas Stars, and it's a good read. It's get really good reviews on Amazon, so pick up a copy and support Sean. He's also on EP Rinkside and Shap Shots, and he's still coming out with articles even though it's summer, and in D Magazine. So he's a beast, and we'll continue to bring these programs throughout the summer because we want to thank you for making us Dallas-Fort Worth's #1 hockey podcast, and cannot wait for the year to start because we're going to have lots of programming for you in the months ahead. So that's going to do it for us. Sean, my man, get back out there and enjoy the wife and kids.
Will do. Everyone, thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening to Spits and Suds. Have a great day, everyone.